You know that feeling when you get a crazy sense of déjà vu? Or a coincidence happens that's just so perfect it almost feels scripted? Well, what if it is? Today we're diving into a really powerful and ancient idea that tackles that exact thought: providence.
So let's just ask the big question right out of the gate. Are all the things that happen in our lives and in history just a bunch of random noise? Or could it all be part of some grand design, threads in a much bigger tapestry? This is the fundamental puzzle that the idea of providence tries to piece together.
So, what is it exactly? Well, in Christian theology, providence is this belief that God isn't just some distant observer, watching from the sidelines. No, the idea is that God is an active director, guiding the whole story of humanity toward a specific goal. It's the idea that reality itself has a plot.
To really get our heads around this, we've got to go back to the source code, so to speak. Let's dig into the biblical origins of providence and see how this whole concept of a divine blueprint was first laid out.
It all starts at the very beginning, literally, with creation. The thinking goes something like this: if God created the world, well then God's in charge of it. And think of it less like a landlord who just collects rent, and more like an architect who's still deeply invested in how the building is being used. This implies there's an ongoing, active plan for everything.
Okay, but that immediately brings up a huge, unavoidable question. If a good and all-powerful God is really in charge, why is the world so full of pain and awful things? It's a massive challenge, and one that people of faith have wrestled with for thousands of years.
The ancient story of Job tackles this problem head-on. Job suffers horribly, and he wants to know why. The theological answer that emerges isn't that God's plan is broken, but that it's way more complex than we can see. It suggests that, maybe, without the darkness of suffering, we could never truly understand or appreciate the light of goodness. It's a really profound and, honestly, difficult idea to grapple with.
So this idea of a divine plan really finds its ultimate expression in Christian theology through one central figure: Jesus Christ. His life is held up as the #1 example of providence in action.
Yeah, from this viewpoint, the life of Jesus is anything but random. Every single moment, from his birth in that stable to his crucifixion on a cross, is seen as a precisely orchestrated step in God's grand plan to redeem humanity.
The way this is understood is often broken down into 3 key parts. First, there's foreknowledge, the idea that Jesus knew exactly what was going to happen to him. Second, predestination, the belief that he was chosen for this specific mission from the very beginning. And finally, fulfillment, the idea that the events of his life perfectly lined up with prophecies made centuries before in the Old Testament.
Okay, so let's zoom out from Scripture for a minute. How has this idea of a divine hand been used to interpret major, world-changing events throughout our own history? Time and time again, huge historical turning points have been viewed as acts of providence. Think about it. Martin Luther kicking off the Reformation and completely reshaping Christianity, the absolutely improbable survival of the Pilgrims and a New World, or the powerful moral force of the Civil Rights Movement. For believers, these aren't just historical accidents. They're moments where that divine blueprint became visible to everyone.
But let's be honest, believing in providence is not easy. It forces us to stare down some of the deepest, most difficult questions there are. So let's get into the major philosophical hurdles this idea has to clear.
And this brings us right back to that question that just echoes through the centuries, the one that cuts right to the heart of this whole thing. If a loving, all-powerful architect is in charge, why is the building full of so much innocent suffering?
And these aren't just small doubts, they're huge philosophical problems. You've got the problem of evil, which asks why bad stuff even exists in a world made by a good God. Then there's the problem of suffering, which grapples with the sheer injustice of it all. And finally, the problem of uncertainty, which asks, hey, even if there is a divine plan, how could we tiny humans ever possibly hope to understand it?
So, when you're faced with these incredibly deep, troubling questions, how does theology even begin to hold on to a belief in providence? Well, the answer involved a shift, a move away from pure logic and towards something transcendent. Essentially, the theological answer is this: our inability to understand the plan doesn't mean the plan doesn't exist. Imagine you're looking at the back of a giant, beautiful tapestry. All you see are knots, tangled threads, a total mess. That doesn't mean the gorgeous image on the other side isn't there. It just means your perspective is limited. That's the argument.
And that's really the bottom line. The theological conclusion isn't a neat and tidy answer. It's an acceptance of the unknown. It suggests that God's plan isn't a puzzle we're meant to solve, but a reality that's just bigger than our ability to comprehend it.
So, in the end, the road to believing in providence isn't paved with intellectual proofs that make the problem of suffering just disappear. For believers, it's a path of faith, a deep trust that even in the middle of chaos, there's a guiding hand shaping a final purpose that we might never fully see this side of eternity. And that leaves us with the final question, doesn't it? Is the universe's story being written, or is it just a bunch of random events? The answer? Maybe. Depends entirely on how you choose to read it.